Welcome to the Sacred Emergence Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Wong, and I'm so thrilled that you're here. This is a place where you'll be guided to living your most aligned life so that your truest, most radiant self can emerge. We'll be jamming on topics ranging from spirituality, entrepreneurship, to wellness and lifestyle design, and everything in between that can support you to grow, evolve, and shine, all the while not taking ourselves too seriously. So if you're ready to step into your leadership, break through limiting beliefs, own all of who you are, and expand in abundance, grab yourself your faith cup of tea and let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Sacred Emergence. I am so thrilled to introduce you to a dear friend of mine, Sarah Grady, who is a doula and a Koya teacher and so much more. So much amazing. And welcome to the show, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So right now you are currently in North Carolina, and you and I met actually in LA through our Koya teacher training.
So many years ago. I'm like, how did that happen?
It's like crazy wild. And it was such a beautiful, it was like three of us plus Rochelle, the teacher. And it's been so fun just, connecting with you, knowing you, and even before the start of our interviews, like we haven't spoken to each other probably for like over a year.
Yeah.
But every time we are in touch, it's like nothing really time hasn't really passed, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of actual sisterhood. Somebody asked me the other day, like, when you moved back to North Carolina, did you have like trouble meeting new friends, or, how have you found the women here? And I'm like, look, that's like the most naturally occurring resource in my life is powerful fucking women. And I kind of don't have time or space to do it any other way. So like, you're either my sister or you're not. And Michelle, you my sister for life. Yeah. And I just think that that's the power of, meeting people through intentional practices like Koya or yoga or spirituality. So yeah.
Totally. Well, we have a juicy topic to dive into today. When you share, we should talk about remothering and healing ancestral trauma. I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. I really liked it because I think so many of us, especially as women, like we have so much healing to do with our mothers. I know I do.
Oh my God, yes. Lifetime's worth.
Yeah. And like, it was just like the latest conversation I had with my mom. Right. And it's like, it's not even a trigger anymore, but it's just like, these keep happening subconsciously if we're not aware of like things that can be taught or passed down to us that we don't even realize through our moms, and also just the relationship itself. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So there's so much to unpack with the mother wound, right? And there's like the individual wounding that we have with our own birth mothers or adoptive mothers. And then there's like the larger meta mother wound of that real sense of separation from Mother Earth, from source consciousness, God, goddess, whatever you want to call that. And they're both important to examine because they both inform the other. And I find that you can heal one through the healing of the other. And I've just recently begun to do this in my life. And it's funny, like in between the time that we decided to do this podcast together and now I had actually experienced a re-wounding with my mother, but it landed so differently because I've done the work that I've done. So I wanted to talk to you and your listeners about that because I found some really powerful practices and gateways for navigating that wound, which is really like a universal wound.
Yeah, let's go right in.
Okay, great. So I think it's important to name that where this journey for me around healing the mother wound actually came through like physical journeys of moving all over the country and the world, actually. And then finally making a pilgrimage to the land that all of my people come from, which is Ireland. Um, and so I grew up in Cary, North Carolina. My parents divorced when I was young, and I really struggled in my relationship with my mom because I never felt like she saw me or she heard me. And I felt like I was going crazy as a young kid and as a
Mm.
teen of just like, why am I not good enough for you? Like, why can't you see all that I am? I'm like literally and metaphorically tap dancing for you. Like,
Mm.
hello,
Yeah.
you know? And I realized at a certain point, like, she might not ever be able to. And
Mhm.
I didn't have the language for that then that I have now. But what I knew that I needed to do to save myself from the constant daily triggering of not being seen and heard and therefore valued, um, was I needed to leave. And so at age 18, I began my heroine's journey and I left for college. I went to Emerson College in Boston and studied theater arts. And that was the first time I remember landing in Boston, and it was the first time I felt like I could breathe. It was the first time I felt like I was around other people like me, and it was the first time that I felt at home in my body and in myself.
Mm.
And my whole system, my whole nervous system just did a massive exhale.
Mm.
And I would say that at 18, I kind of started living.
Oh, wow. And you felt at home because of the people you're around? Like it was
Hmm.
just because you could be yourself?
Yeah, it was twofold. I was in art school, so I was around other theater artists and dancers, performers, and that was a real homecoming for me. But it was also about living in a major city
Mm.
and being deeply connected to the earth that I was walking on every day, and the rhythms and the pulse and the music and the food and the smells, and in short, the aliveness.
Yeah.
And that was really important for me because I grew up in suburban North Carolina with a ton of subdivisions and strip malls. And I always felt like something was lacking, like I was going crazy. I'm like, where is their actual life? Because it's not here. And I couldn't understand why my parents would have chosen that. Um, and I couldn't understand why my mom, who I didn't feel seen or heard by, like also was angry at me for wanting something more,
Mm.
for needing something more. Um, And so I left and I experienced that first like blossoming and healing that happened for me in Boston. And also, I would say for most artists, probably they would agree with this. It's like when you have the privilege of studying an art form, which you're also studying on a meta level, is presence.
Mhm. Yeah, totally.
And that presence was a real gift, for me to be cultivating in myself, but to be surrounded by other people who were doing the same.
Mm.
Um, yeah. And so from college, I graduated college early and I moved to Los Angeles and worked for PBS in LA for a
I
few
had no
years.
idea.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
like that's wild.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm like a super Irish white girl, right? But like from a very young age, always wanted to speak Spanish, was obsessed with like Latino culture and music and food. And I honestly felt like I was born in the wrong lineage, the wrong body. I was like, why is my skin white? Why do these people only speak English? I don't understand. And so it was such a godsend when a professor of mine was a producer for this show. And she was like, look, I can't guarantee you a job, but I just have a feeling that you should fly out to LA and interview for this show. And I got it.
Mm.
And it was such a blessing. And so it was a bilingual talk show, English and Spanish. And it was all centered around early childhood education issues. And it was really like The View, but for mothers, um,
Wow.
talking about mothering and raising kids and doing like, um, work with the young kids in their homes. And so that really started my career of working with women and
Mm.
listening to their stories, celebrating what they were doing in the community, and then finding a way to elevate them both on television and then when we weren't in production, organizing, events around the country to honor them.
That's
So
awesome. That's so
yeah.
cool. I didn't know they had like a show for that.
Yeah.
I don't watch
Yeah.
PBS, but
Yeah. It was beautiful. I think we had a contract for like 3 or 4 years. It was called A Place of Our Own, Y los Niños en su casa. And it was so transformational for me for many reasons, but one of which was that KCET, the local PBS station I worked for, was mostly run by women. So it was a show by women, for women, about women. And it gave me the real sense of empowerment that I could do what I wanted to do as a woman.
Mm.
And so that was healing for me too, in talking
Yeah.
to other women and talking to mothers and seeing how they were raising their kids and how they cared about the kids in their world.
Yeah.
And so then from LA, I actually moved to Chile and I taught English for a year in Patagonia.
Okay.
And yeah, you're learning all these things about me.
Yeah, I guess I knew you from Koya, and after everything
Yeah.
that is like
The through lines are that. So I should say is like I started dancing at age 3. So I've been a dancer my whole life, and that's how I found my way back to Koya. But I've been speaking Spanish since I was in kindergarten, and yeah. And so I left LA because the contract for the show was up, and they offered me like an admin position at the station, and I was like, no, I'm not here for that.
Yeah, totally.
And I've always had the travel bug, and so I ended up getting a job through the Chilean Ministry of Education, and the UN had a program, and I taught English for a year in Patagonia. And what I realized very quickly was that my students, they didn't want to learn English. They could care less. These were like really underprivileged kids who needed, like, honestly, a mother figure. They needed somebody to hug them. They needed somebody to listen to them. They needed a warm meal and a safe haven away from some of the abuse and things that were happening in the village. And through a series of synchronicities that actually prompted me to come back to the United States and go to grad school to become a therapist. Um, and so I moved to San Francisco, went to the California Institute of Integral Studies, and got my master's in drama therapy because I wanted to bridge the art form of theater and all that it had helped heal in me and merge that with therapy, with therapeutics.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as life often has a plot twist, it's like we think we're going into something for one reason, and then life shows us, right, what that other reason is. So I'll just share that, because of my bilingual skills, I was paired up with mostly Latino families in the Bay Area and doing really intensive in-home therapy and residential treatment facility work for at-risk youth. And there was just complex trauma going on for all of these kids, right? And a lot of them living in single parent homes, mostly single mothers, but sometimes single fathers. And there was so much that I felt restricted by as far as the system of community mental health was allowing me to do and not do. And I was burning out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I noticed that my body was responding to this burnout. And one of the things was that I started to get lumps in my breast.
Oh.
Yeah. And the breast is this part of the body so deeply connected to the mother archetype.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very grateful that, several doctors visits later, they're like, you're fine, but can we help you with your anxiety? And that my body was just really responding to a pattern of mothering and giving and overgiving and under receiving. Right. I was mothering everyone else around me, all of my clients, my friends, my colleagues, and I wasn't receiving that in return.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I really was like, okay, something's got to shift. And after all these years of like hustling in all these major cities and connecting with mothers in all these different capacities, and really going through lots of undulations with my own mother throughout the process, I was like, I have some big healing to do. So that was a lot. And take a breath.
Yeah, that's incredible. I actually didn't know all of that. Um,
Mm,
and I feel like there is, like you said, dance is a through line. Well, I would like same with like the mother and the child theme.
mhm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and really just women. Like, I think
Mhm.
one thing I'm very grateful to my mom for, though, is that she really raised me to be a strong woman
Yeah.
and to not take shit from anyone. And um, and so I've always found myself professionally working with women and trying to figure out what is the best container for me to show up in support of women and their bodies and their families, but that is also sustainable for me.
Yes. Yes. The sustainable piece for sure.
Yeah. And I speak that kind of before I share a little bit more of my journey because earlier when you introduced me and we were talking about like ancestral patterns,
Mhm.
one of the biggest patterns that I received in utero from my mom was like unbelievable hard work. You just work hard
Mm.
and you don't get to have any feelings about that.
Mm.
And you overgive and your value, your worth is based on how much you're doing and you're giving, not who you're being.
Mm. So I have two questions.
Yes.
How did you come to that? Like, how did you realize that? Was it through like journeying or through the tools that you might talk about in this episode? Um, and the second one, it's not a question. It's just an observation. Like that is pretty masculine. It's ironic.
Yes.
What you
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, so kind of the beauty of going to grad school to become a psychotherapist is like you have to do all the exercises on yourself that you would do with a client. So I mean, god damn, I paid a lot of money basically for really intensive therapy for 3 years of my life. And so I worked my ancestral programming and trauma pretty hard from both my maternal side and those messages and also my paternal. And in the mezcla that is the United States, it's actually pretty rare to like have a lineage that's pretty uniformed. And so to have both an Irish maternal and paternal lineage to draw from
Mm,
was interesting for me because the Irish were, so oppressed within their own country, but then also when they came to the United States were, enslaved. They were treated as second class citizens and this is common of many waves of immigration, I want to
mhm,
name. But we were some of the first waves. And that lives in the DNA. That
mm,
lives in the cellular memory of people. And when you don't know that you're worthy or good enough unless you literally work yourself into the ground. You just perpetuate that is the only way to effectively attain two things: safety and success.
mhm,
Um, and so, hmm, what feels important to say about that? I was always such an overachiever as a kid. I think as a result, because I really got so much praise in my family system for like being an obscenely straight A student and being captain of everything and all the extracurriculars. And it was just like, wow, like I was burnt out by age 18.
mm,
And even going to theater school, like I approached it in a very masculine, achievement oriented way.
yeah.
And I realized at some point as I was burning out as a therapist that like even though I had on the outside looking in followed my passions through dance and theater and film and television and now counseling psychology, my approach to it was the same damn way that my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my ancestors had all done it.
Hmm.
And it was literally harming my body and soul.
Yeah. Ooh, that is good. Like that awareness. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at that point, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a healer. And she was like, two things. You've been a doula for so many lifetimes, it's not even funny. So you should seriously look into that as a career change. Like, okay. And instantly had like chills and tears all over my body. I was like, yep, cool. That's the thing. And then she was like, and when did you stop dancing? And why are you not incorporating that dance into the work that you do?
Wow. I like this girl.
Yeah, she's amazing. And I actually met her my freshman year of theater school. We were roommates, dear Katie Morgan. I love her so much. And it was from that conversation that I immediately hopped online and started looking at dance movement forms to train in. And I found a video of Rochelle and like the rest was
Mm,
history. And I was like, yeah, it's supposed to be a choir teacher.
yeah.
um,
Love it.
so um, really my desire for healing and remothering myself was because my body was not going to let me do it any other way.
Mm.
I was so exhausted every day, and it was just getting harder and harder to function. And I was doing this all on the West Coast. I was seeing my entire family, which lives on the East Coast, like I was seeing them once or twice a year for the holidays, and it was hard to convey to them what my day-to-day reality was like. And to them it was like, well, you just keep pushing. You just keep pushing.
Yeah.
You don't get to live life from a soulful place. You don't get to take a gap year, Sarah. Like, there were certain limiting beliefs that were passed down to me. Um, and so I knew that if I was going to change, I was going to have to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the root of remothering.
Mm.
So we all have the relationship that we have with our biological or adopted mom. And often that relationship looks like our mom's relationship with their moms, or a response to that, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And so it's kind of like, well, at some point I had to start examining um, why my mom was the way she was. And when I started to peel back the layers and see, like, well, she's an adult child of an alcoholic. Actually, both of my parents are. And we're pretty stereotypically Irish in that sense of like, there's a lot of alcoholism and addiction that runs through our family. And, one of my grandfathers checked himself into rehab when I was 2. I mean, it's that fresh in their psyche.
Mhm.
So, my mom never felt seen or heard. She was literally just trying to survive in a trauma soup every day. So she didn't ever cultivate the tools to do that. And she also didn't choose to cultivate the tools to heal herself, or to know how to see and hear her own daughter.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and so I have a lot of compassion for my mom. Um, but just because I have compassion for what it is that she has survived and how far she's come from that doesn't mean that somehow I put my own needs aside for
Yeah.
loving, feeling loved and seen and held and nurtured, and like all the things that we think about in the mother archetype, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And don't get me wrong, like my mom, she's really great in certain ways. Like if I go through a breakup with a boyfriend, man, next day she's got a little black dress for me and a fresh bottle of wine, and she's like, "Girlfriend, come sit down and talk."
Oh,
But if I have something, really deep in my soul that I want to discuss, like she can't hold it
mm,
because she didn't get that holding.
yeah. So part of it, she probably doesn't know how,
She doesn't know how.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I realized that like I didn't want to continue to blame her the rest of my life for not getting what I needed. And
Mhm.
that as an adult, it was my responsibility to cultivate that for myself. And that is simultaneously liberating and heartbreaking.
I know. It's like, even as you said that, I was like, yeah. Time to be a grown
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah. Really though. And I was so grateful for all the tools I learned in therapy, and also for just watching other moms in the world. And it was like, okay, well, when I'm going through an experience it's really hard, like what are the things that make me feel seen and held and heard and safe and nourished? And for me, often those things either look like some form of embodiment, so dancing, running, walking, moving in nature somewhere. um, but the other thing was that I started to source mother in other people, and often mother looks like sister.
Mm,
Other women who also moving through their own mother wounds, somehow coming together and having these incredible conversations and relationships saying, "Sister, I see you," you know?
Mhm.
And I would say that it's that community of amazing women around the world that I'm privileged to love and be loved by, and then my own personal, like, healing practices and embodiment practice that have really, um, nurtured and nourished me and remothered me. Um, but there's something, in the recognition of the grief that my mom, your mom, our collective mothers may never ever be able to give us the things that we need or say the things we need to hear.
Yeah.
Um, we can't just bypass that grief because our happiness and our joy is waiting on the other side of that grief. And that grief is nonlinear, and we're going to get triggered for the rest of our lives. But we're also responsible for resourcing ourselves during that. And so I actually just had this really triggering conversation with my mom the other week where I was so excited to share a vision and a dream of mine with her that I thought she was totally going to love and support because she had kind of helped plant the seed about a year ago for it. And she looked at me with bewilderment, and the whole conversation did not go well. And I was just so confused. And I came home and I was crying.
Mhm.
And, as a doula, I hold a lot of babies. And so I'm constantly in this like motion of like holding a baby up and patting their back or, soothing them,
Yeah.
tapping their butt. And so I literally placed my left hand on my heart and my right hand over that. And I just started to tap my heart like I was
Mm.
tapping a baby's bottom. And I was saying the things that I thought a mother would say, which is like, it's
Mm.
okay. It's okay, sweet one. I'm here. You're loved. You're safe. All is well. And then what I heard arise from within me, from the little girl in me, was, you know what? It's not okay.
Mm.
And I've been really sitting with that practice of acknowledging her and not trying to do what I think so many mothers often do in moments of emotional vulnerability or expression or even crisis, which is like, it's fine, and kind of brush things under the rug or use avoidance or denial or deflection as tactics, because they don't actually know how to just sit in the soup of vulnerability.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable, right?
And it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? And yet, when I think back to all of my moments holding women's hands in television or kids in Patagonia or, crazy intense situations as a therapist, and even now to new mamas as a doula, there is nothing more freeing or liberating than to be that solid object in the room for a woman who's just like, what the fuck do I do? And to
Mm.
look her in the eyes and go, yeah, it's really hard. And I hear that it's hard. Can we just sit in the hardness right now?
Mm. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not let it not need for that to be different. Like, and that I really have to say that Koya has been a huge shift in my own experience of that. Because in
Mm.
Koya we say there's no way you can do it wrong,
Mm. Yeah.
you know? And like I think the mother-daughter relationship is so tender because we feel like as we're growing up, like there's a right or a wrong way to behave or to perform or to be in order to receive love from this person who gave life to us. And I know for me, I was constantly putting my center of control outside of myself onto her and kind of like codependently dancing around, like, how can I be this perfect little daughter for you?
Mhm.
And it's like, actually, it's not about her. It's about me and learning how to be authentically, unapologetically myself and saying to the little girl inside, like, it's really okay that it's not okay.
Mm.
And the more I give her space and actually just listen to what she needs, the wounding dissipates so much faster.
Mm.
And when I listen to her voice over the years, she has guided me to people and places to experience that remothering like in a really tangible physical way so that
Mhm.
my my body and my nervous system could know it as true. And what I mean by that is, as I shared earlier in the podcast, like here I was, this like Irish American white girl feeling like she was born in the wrong body in the wrong family, going like, come on, like where's the flavor in life? And like these ancestral messages that like, oh yeah, you're just like a stereotypical like Irish family of like drunkards and you just Irish workhorses, and yeah, there's not really great food or anything to be proud of if you're Irish unless you're, St. Patrick's Day, and then we just move on. And as common with a lot of immigrant stories, like my grandfather would always say, oh, the smart ones left Ireland. It's just like the smart ones left, and so you're perpetuating this legacy of running away. And I realized at a certain point, like if I was ever going to fully heal my own wounding, my own like sense of soul loss and identity, and really belonging in the world, I was going to have to stop running away from the thing that I thought was so boring or dissonant, and go look at it. And life has a funny way of helping me to make those decisions before even, I'm consciously ready of doing that. And so the two things happened, which was I really got pushed out of the Bay Area and the hustle of just like trying to survive in San Francisco. And I decided to move back to North Carolina, to the mountains of North Carolina and Asheville. And I swore I would never come back to my home state. And yet there I was. And not only did I live in Asheville, but then after about a year there, I felt the portal gates of that town closing in on me, going, okay, now you really have to go home, not just to the state, but like actually to the towns that you grew up in. And so about a year ago, I drove down the mountain to Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, and had no clue what was happening in my life or why I was being guided to go back home. And then a series of synchronicities occurred for me to realize that I was really actually meant to stay in Raleigh-Durham. And, but in order to complete that knowing, I had to go back to the home of the home. And I got a pretty clear call from my inner child to go to Ireland. And something profound happened for me there. And I want to say too, like, many of my family members have gone back to Ireland multiple times and they've invited me. And I've always said no, because I had a real strong sense that I needed to go for myself and to experience it, not just as a tourist, but really as a soul pilgrim, to know why had I chosen to be born into this lineage, into this skin, in this time, and from this earth, right? And so I went, and I'll never forget, like flying into the Dublin airport, I just couldn't hold back the tears. And from the second I landed on Irish soil, I knew in my cells I was home. And everywhere I went, I just cried for 2 weeks. It didn't matter where I went and who I was with, I just cried. It was the deepest sense of belonging that I have ever felt outside of when I'm dancing. I finally saw people who looked like me. I looked into blue eyes after blue eyes everywhere I went. I heard incredible, witty stories and banter and song and like really rich folklore and tradition and ritual, and celebration of life and aliveness. I witnessed so much beauty, so much abundance, so much magic. I mean, like seriously, my ancestors rolled out the red carpet. I can't tell you how many meals I had paid for me just because.
Amazing.
How many just like synchronistic meetings with random people in the pubs, because I was traveling alone for the most part. And I just like I finally got it when I was there, that I come from a place and from a people to be very proud of.
Mm.
And that the Irish people are incredibly resilient. They are incredibly passionate and bright and actually very deep feelers and thinkers and
Mm.
artists and poets. And I really witnessed through a series of conversations and also experiences I had how hard it has been to live in that country for such a long time. And it finally dawned on me that, like, I actually wouldn't be here if my ancestors hadn't left.
Mm.
And so I could understand why my grandfather had said all those years, like, the smart ones left, the smart ones left.
Mhm.
But something happens. This mother wound inside us becomes kind of like a haunted ghost, where I experience for myself, if I'm always just running away from something, and I never return, then I'm just in a constant state of running.
Mhm.
And I never actually get to come home and know that I belong somewhere. And something really deep happened for me when I got back from Ireland. I actually went to go have dinner with my mom, and it was probably the best conversation. It's probably the best time I've ever had with my mom in my entire 34 years on the planet.
Mm.
We just sat in this restaurant and poured a glass of wine and laughed and cried and shared stories. And, like, on some level, even though my mom and I don't actually share the same language about a whole lot of things, that we did.
Mm.
And it was primal, Michelle. And it was deeply healing. And and I think there was a lot of forgiveness that
Mm.
came through that. And it really charged me to come back to my hometown and to know my belonging in the world, know my purpose, know my beauty, know my strength, and really know my worth. And and I think, like, on a metaphysical level, it was almost like I saw the umbilical cord that existed between me and my family here in the States and the womb of Ireland that had been
Mm.
broken and cut over so many generations was now being restored.
Mm. Wow. Like when you were sharing, just like when you were, visiting Ireland, and like the word that came through for me was that you just reclaimed, like there's something like reclamation of some sort,
Hmm.
um, which is incredibly powerful. Yeah.
It was a deep reclaiming.
Yeah. And so in the beginning, when we first started the conversation, you were saying how you can heal your relationship with your mom, either directly or through like the collective mother.
Hmm.
So was that for you going back, or not going back, but visiting Ireland? Was that like for you, that was the healing for like one of the
Yeah,
threads? Yeah.
it was. It was. I think because I don't think that my mom ever felt growing up. I mean, she grew up pretty poor in New Jersey with a super Irish Catholic family. I don't think that she ever felt proud of where she came from.
Mm.
And I think she was running away from that for a long time. And so I feel like, as the good Scorpio that I am, I had to get to the root of the root of the root. And what I was reclaiming for myself, but also all those who came before me and all those who will come after me, is like a real sense of pride,
Mm.
you know? And it has nothing to do with the money in our bank account and how impoverished we may have been for so many generations or where we are now. Um, but it was really, truly from stepping foot on that earth.
Mm.
The Irish soil is some of the most abundant earth I've ever seen. It is so lush and so green and so fertile. And the cows and the sheep that roam that earth so freely are wise, wise beings. And the people who tend to those animals are truly divine people.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And And I think also something happened for me, which was that I witnessed the generosity of a people, like a true hand outstretched towards me, um, in a way that was like almost overwhelming. Like
Mm.
when I said I had so many meals paid for me and crazy, beautiful gifts bestowed in transportation and all sorts of things, it was like, you are one of us.
Mm.
And we would give you anything because you're a part of this fabric.
Mm.
And I don't have to go all the way down to Chile and Patagonia to know that I belong somewhere.
Yeah.
Like it's right here in my blood.
Right. It's like you already belong. It's just
I already
seeing
belong.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah. As I'm just kind of sitting with it in this moment, I'm feeling that it's an incredible privilege to go back to one's ancestral homeland.
Mm-hmm.
And for a multitude of reasons, many immigrants will never be able to. And and so I don't take that privilege lightly. I'm aware that I get to go back to Ireland anytime I want to now and learn from my ancestral mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And and that it's these fractures that happen in waves of immigration around the world create fractures in our psyche and in our somatic bodies. And they keep getting repeated until someone in the lineage says, that stops here,
Yeah.
you know?
Totally.
And often that person in the family looks like the black sheep. And
Yeah.
I really, really identify with that archetype. I mean, I literally just speak a different language than my family.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, and yet they're the perfect family for me. There's something to push up against so that I do the healing work that I'm here to do on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
for myself, but also like for the larger community.
Yeah. I mean, the more we, heal ourselves on the journey, the more the collective heals. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the whole point.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just say too is like going to Ireland and then also coming back to live in North Carolina, um, and and as a result feeling like this sense of self-belonging in a way I never had enables me to look at the people, places, and things that have wounded me in the past, um, with appreciation,
Mm-hmm.
with respect, with understanding, with compassion, with far less judgment, and ironically, with far less of a need to actually be seen and heard and held by them.
Mm.
Because I'm doing that on my own now.
Yeah.
And that's real. And so I feel like I wanted to share with your listeners that everyone has a different gateway into this healing, and like for some people it might literally be talk therapy for 5 years about talking about all the things that happened between you and your mom, and like that's going to do it for you. And for me, I knew that that was not my way.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so physically moving around and touching down with the earth grid, and being surrounded by powerful people who were also on a healing path and who didn't want to escape their bodies but wanted to get in their bodies as the gateway to that healing, whether it was
Mm-hmm.
in relationship to the mother or not, has just been so powerful for me. um, and then of course now as a doula, like supporting new life coming into the world, I tell moms that I really feel like being a doula is ancestral healing work.
I believe that.
Yeah. And that it's social activism work. Because if you can sit with a mom while she still has baby in utero and talk about what are the things that happen between her and her mom or her family, or And you may not even go that direct. You might just say like, what are some of your fears? What keeps you up at night? Or what are you worried about in the world? And then really starting to interview that woman about, well, do you want to pass those worries down to your baby?
Mm.
And saying you actually have a choice. We all have a choice at every moment to decide what our frequency is, what our reality is, what our vibration is. and babies are pure energy, right? So they're just receiving that energetic current of the mother nonstop in utero and in the postpartum as well. And so for a woman to not feel like ashamed of her history or her fears or her neuroses, but to go, wow, I feel empowered to actually make a shift, and to know that that heals not just me, but my baby and my baby's baby.
So good. Yes. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's infinite ways to do that. It can be really simple, and it can also be super multidimensional and complex. It can, like sometimes I just envision like placing hands on a mom's womb and just saying a very simple prayer of like, wow, I let go of anything that doesn't belong to me across all time and space, dimension, and throughout the multiverse. And anything of, lower frequency or energy or thought that is not mine, I just gift that back to the earth, or I gift it up to the light of consciousness or to source, however pray, and take a deep breath in and then let it go. Yeah. And trust that that's enough.
So, where are we?
We've been talking for a while.
This is so good. I can talk forever. So for your work, can people are you virtual? Like, how can people work with you? Like, where can people have access to you?
Yeah. Well, like on a literal level, you can find me at sarahbrianne.org, because my full name is Sarah Brianne Grady, and that's Sarah with an H, and then BRYANNE.org. And I talk about these womb transmissions through a body of work I created called the 7 Sacraments of the Goddess. And each sacrament is a way to come back into greater balance and harmony within yourself, within your body, within your relationships, and with the earth, as a companion to actual birth work. And so if you're working with me and I'm your doula, often I do 2 prenatal visits where we talk about like your birth needs, right? And then I do an ancestral healing session.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and we really go into the energetics. We start to talk about what are some of the stories that got passed down to you from your mom about anything, really. What are the stories that you're carrying? And then we start to move some of the energies around that and start to rewrite the stories. And then that can even shift how a birth happens. A woman who was really unconsciously like clenching her entire body now has more relaxation and may have a less traumatic birth. She may have a faster birth. She may be in a more meditative state. I mean, all sorts of things can shift on a physiologic level after we do this more ancestral energetic piece.
Wow. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's rituals we can do, baby blessing ways, and then also mother blessing ways, where really the village of women around this blessed mother come around and reflect back to her strengths, her beauties, their prayers for her, their knowings for her, so that she knows she's not alone as she's about to cross into this threshold, this, powerful rite of passage. Because when a woman births a baby, she's also birthing herself as a mother.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And then in the postpartum, it's a real opportunity to also support that woman with other rituals. And one of them, I learned through Koya, actually. It's an ancient Mayan ritual called wrapping the bones.
Do I know that one? Wrapping the
Um,
bones.
we do it in the Koya intensive, so it's the
Okay.
third training.
Okay.
But it originates with the Maya people.
Mm.
And essentially what it is after a woman gives birth, there's so much focus and attention on the baby, but the Maya really said, well, this woman needs to also feel like she's been held and back
Yeah.
in the womb. And so a woman who just gave birth will lie down, or in this case, any woman, you can just do this as a ritual to feel held and remothered,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
But you're going to want to gather about 3 to 5 blankets and let's see, 4 people in addition to the woman who's receiving. And as this woman lies down and receives, there's a woman at her feet. There's a woman at her head, kind of cradling her head, neck, and
Mm.
shoulders. And then there's a woman on each side of her. And the women at her feet and at her head are really just like holding space for her. Hands are placed on those parts of the body and they're sustained there the whole ritual. And they're moving energy throughout her system, and they're also intuiting any messages from spirit, from angel, from
Mm.
ancestors, images that come through, messages. Um, the 2 women on the side move from the feet all the way up to the shoulders, literally wrapping fabric around the woman.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so you'll take like a blanket and the women will cross it across the body, and then
Mm.
they'll rock the body like you would rock a baby, and then they'll
Oh.
intuit when it's time to stop the rocking and then move up the body to the next blanket.
Oh, wow.
And so they cross and they wrap and they rock and they keep doing this all the way up the body so that the woman literally feels like she's now completely encased, almost like a mummy, but like in her own womb space.
Mm.
And she can stay in this space for as long as she needs to feel held. And then when she intrinsically feels like it is time to emerge and integrate this new being that she is, she begins to sit up and takes the blankets off of her. And the 2 women, the one at her feet and the one at her head, will now sit, on either side of her. And she sits in between them with her, legs open. And they embrace her and hug her and rock her. And then they will share with her any messages from spirit that came through.
That is so beautiful. I
Yeah.
love that it's part of Koya.
Yes, I was so grateful to learn it. I think when I learned it, it had just been added to the curriculum for training, and I was
Yeah.
so blessed. And I've done it for 7 Sacraments of the Goddess workshops and
Mm.
other day longs that I've taught, and it's hands down the thing that people talk about the most.
Yeah. I mean,
You
that is,
know?
even me picturing it and seeing it in my mind, I'm like, I could feel it. And
Hmm.
it's just, I could feel how nourishing that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like, we live in a touch deprived society in the West.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, part of my mother wounding was that, like, I couldn't take my mom's breast milk.
Mm.
And I couldn't figure out what milk would work for me. Like, I couldn't handle the formula and I couldn't handle soy, and I forget what they ended up landing on, but it was a real like source of contention at such an early
Mm.
stage in my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily get that physiologic bonding with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think my whole life, not that that was the whole reason, but I think it played a part in where my whole life I've really craved and needed touch in
Mm.
order to feel safe and held and belonging in the world.
Yeah.
And so this ritual is one of those beautiful ways of receiving that. It's just like the biggest hug from the cosmic mother you could ever imagine. And, like, I'm not a mother yet myself. I hope to be someday, but I'm just like, wow, I feel like I just birthed 3 babies and conquered the world after this ritual.
Boom, right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the thing I want to say is like about that too is, it's a Mayan ritual from South America. It's not an Irish traditional pagan ritual, but it has been a profound access point for me.
Mm.
And through that access point of now knowing, like, what is it that I need to feel nourished and mothered and held, then I can go and resource my own ancestors later with that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and so anyone who's navigating this mother wound and this remothering process, like, just trust the signs and signals that your body and that your spirit is giving you about what your access points are for the healing, and then let the rest unfold.
That is so beautiful. I love that because like there's no formula. There's no here's the checklist. It's
No.
really like what your soul's calling you to
Hmm.
go down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Um, I feel called to share a poem.
Please do.
Okay. And then that's probably like all the time that we have, but I wrote a poem when I got back from my pilgrimage to Ireland.
Mm, I would love to
And
hear it.
okay, great. Um, hmm, it's called Motherland. And it was actually in the writing of this poem about a month after I got back from Ireland that I was able to integrate and understand that what I had just done was mother wound healing by
Mm,
going back to the motherland. And I know that seems really obvious, but it hadn't been for me because I'd been running away from it for so long.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, motherland. I am home, and not because I live here, but because somehow by being here, everything about me seems to make more sense. Ireland, you are a constant DNA activation through tears, streaming hot and sweet down my face for reasons words are not required. And thank goddess because I don't think I could find them. All I seem to find are your moist green soils, salty Atlantic air with kickbacks of whiskey and kindness each time the tide changes, helping me to remember the root of the root of the root. I see my name everywhere. I
Mm.
taste the flavors of my childhood obsessions as if raspberry and rhubarb were proper spirit guides, guiding me to pleasure and nourishment in an otherwise faint daily haunting of lack. Mama, what does it mean to be a member of your massive diaspora? I used to think it a boring whitewash of alcohol and fiery tempers, myths of the smart ones leaving, and a removal of our culture to somehow answer the prayer of safety and belonging in a place with more promise than the womb we left. But now I know I wouldn't be here if you hadn't left. And so I get to know you as a lineage of love, of profound resiliency, of magic and music and brown bread that sustains me, of a generosity deeper than anything I could have imagined. The kind people have gone so long without, are only keen to give. Ireland, you are piercing blue eyes and wry, witty charm. You are double rainbows after the daily deluge of cleansing rain. You are cows that leave imprints in the earth for us to lay in when we have forgotten our way, forgotten our assignment to take up space. You are rocks and cliffs of limestone, highways diverted to honor the fairy home. You are hills of kings and portals to the goddess queens. You are so beautifully flawed and human, ancient and adolescent in your bones of guilt and shame. I have spent decades running away from you, only to realize that the ancestral programming got skewed, and at some point, I became the ancestral prayer to shift our running away into running towards, running with, running through a circuit of belonging that can only ever be felt by running home to the place your people come from, the very place imprinted in your DNA, and say, thank you, but I will take it from here. I will gather your weary running bones and sing over them a prayer for rest, of a release of running, a return of remembering, a declaration that there is enough now. We are enough now and always have been. Our slavery to work, our self slavery to keep us in line with enoughness is ready for compost, ready for death, so that the lives we lead are like a deep breath that settles into the belly of the heart and declares, joy is safe now. May our bodies be a landscape of joy, and may this joy be like a lighthouse leading us home again and again. This is how we heal the mother wound. We can't keep running away from her. We must run home towards her, consciously choose to stay in our bodies, stare her deep into the heart of her womb, and let go. Let her hold you. Let her wipe away your tears. Let her help you remember the importance of running out so you can truly receive the blessing of running home to your belonging. And there is never not belonging, child, only your choice to receive it. So let us sing over the bones and come home now. You've done enough running.
I had so many chills. That was so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah. There are so many beautiful women doing remothering work in the world. So know that there are so many resources. Bethany Webster is an amazing one. Sarah Durham Wilson, she talks about moving from the maiden archetype to the mother and what it really means to rise as mother in your life. There are other women doing powerful work that are indirectly healing this wound. So I'm not alone in it, and trust that the right people and the right resources will find you.
Thank you so much. And I will definitely share your information, and I'll link the other ones that you mentioned. And thank you for sharing your journey, your story, and your vulnerability. It's such an honor to have you here. And I hope all the listeners just delight in you.
Thank you so much, sisters. Yeah. Thank you. It's such a joy and an honor and a privilege to be in connection with you in this lifetime. And just thank you for all the work that you do on the planet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So everyone who's listening, please share this episode, and you can tag us both on Instagram. And what's your Instagram handle?
At Sarah Brianne Grady.
Okay, and then mine is at michellewong.xo. And feel free to share and comment. And thank you so much, everybody. Stay tuned. Bye-bye. Join our free private Facebook group community, Sacred Emergence, to receive more connection, guidance, and support. And take part in our 5-day Inner Confidence Challenge to not only boost your confidence, but to help activate your inner leadership. Details in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the Sacred Emergence podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and thank you in advance for sharing this with others who can benefit. Until next time.